Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar. Really pleased to say that today we're going to be focusing entirely on the Enhanced Housing Register and Atlas for the webinar today. We're going to be following a very similar format, so we're going to start by sharing some slides with you, showing you some of the functionality through pictures, and then we're going to go on to the live site and show you EHR and Atlas through our demo site. So welcome. My name's Tracy Hendren and I'm from the National Practitioner Support Service, and we work with housing partners to deliver the Housing Jigsaw Suite. And I'm really pleased to say that with me today in the room is Gareth Evans. Say hello, Gareth.
Hi, everyone.
So Gareth's the business analyst at Housing Partners who's been doing all the work behind the scenes. And for once today, he's actually with us on the webinar. So if anything goes wrong, I'm going to be able to pass over to Gareth and he's going to put it right immediately. That's where you're supposed to say, yes, I am, or no, maybe. It won't go wrong. So just as a reminder, the webinars are free. They're free and they're open to our current customers, our new customers, and any potential customers. We've got over 30 attendees with us today from different local authorities and partner agencies across the country. And we find the best way of running the webinar is for you to be able to ask questions through the chat facility. So we will go through the presentation and then we'll talk you through the live demo. If you do have a question that you'd like to ask as we go, if you move your mouse to the bottom of your screen, you'll see the following icon. Any questions that you ask through that chat icon will be visible to Gareth and I, and we will be able to answer them as we go through. If we do get lots of questions and we're not able to pick them all up throughout the webinar presentation, the approach that we use is we save the webinar, we add it onto YouTube so you or colleagues can look at it at a later date, and we compile any questions that are asked and we send them out to all of the delegates for the webinar with obviously the answers. So don't worry if your question doesn't get answered as we go through. It might just be that we run out of time, but you will get an answer and we will share those with everybody that's on the call this afternoon. So just as a reminder, what I'm going to do today is I'm going to show you just a bit of background as to how we've got to the position where we're providing EHR and Atlas as a joint module. And then an overview of the module, including a live demo site. And as I said, we'll pick up questions and answers as we go through the hour's session. First and foremost, as always, our rocket, how we started. So we met last April. We agreed that we wanted to work in partnership. We wanted to put the IT specialist in the room with the housing practitioner. We wanted to be in a position to be able to write specifications from the customer's point of view, but them be developed by IT specialists. So that's why we have housing partners and MPSS as part of the Housing Jigsaw Suite. Initially, what we did say we would build would be a PRA module, so the Prevention, Relief, Accommodation and Homelessness element, because we recognised as practitioners that the current IT suites were not set up to really deliver against the new legislation. And to be able to be delivering against the new legislation, it needed a total rewrite. So that's what we did with PRA. What came about after that was very quickly local authorities were saying that's great and we're using it and it's working really well. However, we need more. So that's why we started looking at EHR and Atlas, and that's why we started developing wider modules that all sit under the Housing Jigsaw umbrella. Just as a reminder, Housing Jigsaw is a SaaS solution, so software as a service, with many, many configurable options. So the idea being is we put everything in that we think you need, you may need or could need in the future within each individual module. We put what we think is good practice around the questions, the approach and the checklists that you could be using across the modules. And then we ask you as part of either the configuration within the module or for the configuration manager to support you with prior to you implementing and going live, to determine what configuration options you would like. And we'll talk through a couple of those as we go through this next hour. So first and foremost, just a bit of an overview, a reminder where we started, so why we've got EHR and why we've got Atlas. For us as local authority staff, we recognise that you need a register that works for you, and you need the ability to allocate services that are on that register. So first and foremost, the Enhanced Housing Register. Local authorities are very familiar with this term, a one-stop shop. What we wanted to do was provide you with a one-stop shop for all of your registration needs. So this allows your customer through an online portal, because all of the Housing Jigsaw modules are customer focused, to be able to apply for any services that are run through your social housing options team. It allows you to look at automatic banding, pointing of applications. It's intuitive around the officer dashboards and the workflows. So those of you that are already using PRA will see how this looks and feels very similar in the approach. It interacts with registered and supported accommodation providers. Again, with PRA, what we did was we set everything up around the customer portal, but we also recognised that we can't do this alone as local authorities. So this is about making the relationships, the partnerships with your partners as easy and simple to follow as possible. So you can, and this enables you to add your wider partner agencies in a similar way that you can with PRA, to look at the support needs of your customers and the properties and the services that are being allocated through the Enhanced Housing Register and Atlas. And it supports a significant reduction in administration. So the idea being a one-stop registration. So not only can you add your social housing to the Enhanced Housing Register, if you manage garages or allotments, if you have a private rented sector arm, if you manage private rented sector properties on behalf of landlords, if you allocate into the private rented sector for homeless households and you have a policy in place for that, if you have floating support within the district or the unitary authority, or you're responsible for the commissioning of floating support or the gateway into floating support or supported accommodation. Again, all of these services can be run and managed through the one-stop shop register. And as you've probably guessed, the same approach works for your allocation needs. So not only can you register for different services and different housing on the one-stop register, you can then allocate dependent on how that works for you. So if you want to allocate through choice-based lettings, or if you want to run a shortlist, if you're looking at management transfers, a direct let, or a reciprocal arrangement, you can do this through Atlas, so an advert to let allocation service. Again, it's empowering and informing for customers. We've just enhanced our customer portal, so those of you that are customers should be able to see how the look and feel of the customer portal is much more user-friendly. It allows you to allocate and lettings cascade. So what we mean by that is if you would normally run a shortlist or a direct let for a particular type of property or service, but actually you're not finding anybody's registered for it in the normal traditional way, you could then go on for the same service or property and advertise that through your choice-based letting system, which may attract more applicants than would have initially registered for that particular type of service or property. All of the adverts automatically append the local information, so things like the travel, the health, the schools and the local support services. They're mobile responsive adverts and property alerts, and you can see the map and street view for each property. So that's just a bit of an overview as to how EHR and Atlas function, how we've looked at it in a very different way rather than lots of registers or one register and one way of allocating. The idea is if you want your customers to register for it, you can then allocate it in the way that suits you, and you can allocate it in a different way for the same service or property depending on the interest that you've got or the changes in your processes. I have talked already about the fact that we're very, very keen on ensuring that all of our modules are customer centric. So the idea being that customer is in the center of the journey. So within all housing Jigsaw modules, the customer is at the center of their application. So you can see at a glance from the customer overview what registrations they've applied for, whether they've got a homeless application, whether they've got a previous homeless application. So everything sits at customer level. So you create your customer and everything else hangs off the customer. So you have a John Doe, and then from the John Doe, you can add a homeless application, you can add a housing register application, a supported housing application, a garage application. So the idea being you can see your customer and then you can see what services that they're engaged and linked in with. So just going to talk through some of the bespoke features around the enhanced housing register before we go on to the live demo. First and foremost, we've got our dashboard. So within the dashboard, it works in a similar way to PRA. You'll see all of the modules as we release them are very, very similar in the look and feel. We like pictures, we like things to say what they do and it to be really clear and simple for our users. That includes ourselves. So you can see at a glance the overview of any of the applications. What we found with PRA was we started by putting my applications and very quickly got feedback saying, actually, I want to be able to see my whole team, not just me. And then as soon as we added that, we had a couple of senior officers say, well, that's fine, but I can't see all of the applications because there's 4 senior officers in this local authority, so I can see mine and my teams, but nobody else's. So we added the all applications button. So at a glance, you can see which ones you're working with, which ones your direct team are working with, and which customers have applied to the wider authority or service. You can see the live registrations by type. You can see an overview of the reviews, whether they've completed and whether they're pending. And if they're pending, you can see the reason for the reviews. Again, very, very similar to PRA. If you click on the right-hand side of the donut on the different colors, you can go directly into the cases. So all the widgets within the dashboard can be interrogated by clicking on the interactive legend. So the right-hand side is where if you just click, you can actually go straight into the cases. And you can see more clearly there the My Applications, My Team, and All Applications. When I show you the live demo, you'll be able to see we've got a screenshot on here of the application summary. What we've tried to do, similar to PRA, is provide you with a summary of the overview of the case in one place so that you're able to very quickly and easily understand what the process is for that particular application and what is still required. So you've got the name of the household, you've got underneath the name, we've got the size of the household and whether there's female, male, whether there's children. If there's an asterisk there, it means we've got a pregnancy within the household. You can see the application type. So for this particular case, it's a social housing application. You can see the registration date, any current offers that have been made, any declined offers, and you can see the information that you're working hard on in the back office around the customer. So whether you've got any notes on this case as an officer, whether you've arranged any meetings, whether your customer is required to bring in any documents, whether there's any application actions, and the personalised housing plan, that's for the PRA module. So again, you can see very clearly a very quick brief of the application summary. All of the forms, very, very similar to PRA, are intuitive. The idea being that if you're asking a particular question, that would be dynamic and ask you more. But equally, if you're within a part of the housing jigsaw and you want to move across to something else, you can do so, and you can complete different elements. So here, for example, I'm showing the household information. I don't need to do this in a linear style. If actually the customer starts to tell me about the previous address history, it's a customer with support needs and I'm supporting with the completing the application, I can go and complete the address history before I start completing some of the other information. And as I start completing the actual application form, again, in a similar process to PRA, it will show a green tick to show how far through the application we've got. All questions are dynamic, so in the same way. And you'll really will see as you start using this that everything has a very, very similar look and feel as far as housing jigsaw is concerned. Feel free to help me out at any stage there, Gareth, if you want to join in. The thing that we're quite proud of actually around the housing register is the interactive map. So Gareth has set this up so that all of the parish areas within any of the local authority districts show with a diagram of where they are within the map. And as you can see by the dark blue, if you tick, so we've ticked central, which then colours central in the dark blue. So very, very visual as far as enabling the customer to see very clearly and quickly which areas of the borough, the district that they've chosen as part of their application. I've always found this really helpful with applications in previous local authorities, because actually sometimes it's when you've got it visually in front of you, the customer can see how close some of the other parishes are and how they may consider widening their areas just by the fact that they can actually see them on one map. It's really good, isn't it? Within PRA, we've put in a back office checklist. The back office checklist for us are the ability for you as officers and your managers to be able to evidence the reasoning and the investigations that have happened against each application. So within the housing register, they stand alone. They're not currently linked to any part of the process, but it's almost your old paper file. This is where you can record all of the information that you've got against the application, ensure that you're compliant with the allocations legislation, and evidence any decisions that you've made, including any reasoning. And what we're already finding with local authorities using the PRA system is this is really supportive around the review process, around the management one-to-one supports of officers, and equally if an officer's not in the office on a day that a customer calls, you can see very quickly if where we are within the case. Again, the checklists have a green tick functionality. So if you complete part of a checklist, or you can complete your confirming that they are eligible and that they're a qualifying person, once they've been completed, you will get a green tick against those checklists. So at a glance, as an officer working through the case, you can see which other elements you may or may not have to complete. To be very clear, one of the things that we've tried to do with the housing register, enhanced housing register and Atlas, is in similar vein to PRA, is to add everything in, and then you decide on a configurable basis which elements you want and which bits you don't want. So if there's elements within here that don't align with your allocation policy or your process, that's where we would talk to you with your configuration manager around the configuration of your individual service and module. See, I always end up talking over the slide that's coming next. That's because the slides have been written so well and they just flow from one to the other. So there's certain configuration that you can do as a local authority in the same way as PRA. You can, and again, with the configuration that's within the module, you can do, it's management level. You can do this as many times as you like. And what you're ensuring here is that you're getting a consistent message out to your customers. So you have letter templates. You determine whether logos go on there, whether there's additional paragraphs that go in there, whether there's certain phrases that you do or do not want to be used by all of your officers, and then your officers will use the letter templates, and they'll be populated with the customer details as they're generated through the process. It's the same with the document types. Local authorities are very particular about what documents they require and how many of those documents they require. So some might say, I need 2 weeks wage slips. Another one might say, I need 8 months wage slips. So as a manager, you're able to determine what those documents are, hide the documents that you don't want to see, and add new documents. And that way your officers will be using a consistent set of documents that you're asking for, evidence that you're asking for from your customers. And the last one is the CMS pages. So this is the information about your local authority on your system of housing Jigsaw. And again, it's within your gift to change these as often or as infrequently as you need to. I'm just going to talk through some of the Atlas features. So the thing I'm having most trouble with is the mouse. Okay, so within Atlas, the local authority dashboard, again, those of you that are using our PRA will see that this is very similar. You get an overview of the adverts, an overview of the vacancies, the shortlists, and customers on multiple shortlists. Some of these widgets are still in development, so we're adding to them. But what we wanted to do is show you where we are and how much we've already built and how quickly we can get this up and running for you. It's the same process. On the right hand side, you can click on these and you can move in and out of the individual widgets. But it's a very nice overview as a manager or as an officer to be able to see how many applications you've got and where within the process they are, and how many of those applications have then gone through to the adverts and and where those customers are within that process, including whether the registered provider or local authority has taken the first person on the list, or the customer has actually accepted the first property that's been offered to them. The interrogation of the system is exactly the same. You just click on these and you can go into the cases. So we've got 101 in total, 63 of them have been shortlisted, and you would literally just click on the shortlist to see those properties. When you're putting an advert on, I think one of the most challenging things with any system is not knowing how far through that system you are, what still needs to be done. So again, we try very hard to ensure that we use pictures on everything that we do. So again, you can see here that we're at the start of the process of adding an advert, and it's showing us that we need to put the details of the property or the service that we're providing. And as we go through, they're coloured, and then we're able to actually advertise the property or the service. But again, as an officer, you can see very clearly how far you've got through that process. With every property or service, obviously there's functionality that sits behind that, so that within Atlas you can then add on all of the charges and all of the functionality that you want to be seen with the advert. I'm calling this an advert, but if you are doing a direct let or a shortlist, it's exactly the same process. You'll put it on in the same way, so the property will look like a property on Rightmove or another site where you can see where it is in the country, you can see pictures of it, you can see local area details. So even if you're doing a shortlist or a direct let back in the office, you're able to sit with the customer at the desk, showing them the property that they've been allocated or you're nominating them to with their local RP. You can show them where the property is, show them the local services, evidence that you've met their needs, you've looked to ensure that it's reasonable, suitable and affordable for them. These are the pictures. You can add the pictures. You can add as many as you want. You can also label them internal or external pictures. You can add, what's it called? That shows you floor plan. You can add floor plans to the property ads, and they're automatically compressed when they're uploaded. So this is to help with speed and with size, isn't it? Yeah. Again, with the property labels, you can determine the property labels and you can determine whether it's an essential criteria, or whether you're going to prioritize your adverts, and whether that's through a shortlist or through choice-based lettings, with a high or low priority against the labels that you add to the individual property or service. So if it's absolutely essential, then only those with the essential criteria as far as linking it back to the questions asked within the registration will appear on the shortlist, or will appear on the choice-based letting, will be able to bid through choice-based lettings. If it's a high priority, they can still show, even if they haven't got that high priority, but obviously they'll be shown as a low priority case. So again, depending on your questions and how that links to the label will depend on how you can filter households against individual properties or services. This is another piece that we're a little bit pleased with, actually. One of the biggest challenges we found as practitioners is having a property that you've advertised through choice-based lettings. It's a brand new Section 106 within the parish of Small and Tiny. And as a direct result of that, you have to have a local connection, and that's a ripple pond effect local connection. Therefore, those that have been there the longest have the strongest local connection. Those that don't live there but live in the neighbouring parishes have the next strongest connection, and those that don't live there or in the neighbouring but actually work or volunteer maybe have a third tier connection to the property. And historically, what's happened is everybody bids on the property, and then it's the poor allocation officer's job to go through and phone all those households, asking them whether they meet the local connection Section 106 criteria and which part of that criteria they meet. Well, now what you can do is add supplementary questions to your choice-based lettings model. So this will allow you to actually add the property, and then if somebody bids on it, because you haven't asked all of those very bespoke questions at the time of application, you can ask them now. So as part of that bidding process, once I tick yes, I'd like to bid for that property, it will then ask me the supplementary questions, and my bid will only be accepted if I meet any of the criteria, and my bid will be prioritised dependent on which of the criteria I meet. This is how the property looks when it's actually advertised. So again, just as a reminder, this is really useful for choice-based lettings, but it's also useful for those shortlisting and back office allocations, because actually sometimes the worst part of that is not being you as an officer not seeing the accommodation, and the customer not seeing or having any idea visually as to what the property looks like or whereabouts the property is. So you'll be able to show them this in the office, even if you don't use it as a choice-based letting. And then you can manage your shortlist, so you can filter within the shortlist element by organisation type, so whether it's yours or whether it's an RP or other. You can filter it by the policy, so which policy is applied to that particular allocation. So that could be your social housing policy, it could be your supported housing policy, it could be your letting garages policy. So depending on the policy will depend on how they're then shortlisted, and the status of the application, and then any advert filters that you've applied. So it just allows you to use a very bespoke system in a very flexible way. Again, once you've shortlisted for a property, you're able to make an offer to your customer, or your RP or your service provider can make an offer depending on what functionality you give your partner agencies. Either you will do it yourself, or your partner agency will be able to do it on your behalf. And they can bypass properties, and we have reasons in here around bypasses. And are these configurable? I'm going to ask him online. Are these configurable bypass reasons, Gareth?
They are, yes.
So again, what we have found with local authorities we're working with around the configuration of EHR and Atlas is we have two documents that we send to our new customers. One is a spreadsheet with all of the questions for all of the types of services. And it's including some additional information around what those questions might trigger. And then we send a Word document with the other configurable elements of the system, including your allocation policy and your internal processes and your authorization and validation processes through your officer and through your manager, so that we can configure it so that it works for you as a local authority or partner agency. So you see here, once the offer's been made, they can accept the offer, or you can select your configurable customer refusal reason. The RP, LA, or service provider can also bypass, and again, this is configurable, and this sits within your gift really as the owner of the system as to who can do what within the system, whether they can bypass or whether you're just giving one offer to the RP, or whether they have the same rights as you do and you expect them to complete the full process. So it kind of works for everybody really, the way that we've tried to set it up. And then just to close the process, which we all know is probably the most frustrating element for us, is to ensure that there's a commencement date on the service that's being provided. So whether that's a property or whether that's a floating support service or other, you can then record when that service commenced to enable you to have a full list of information. And when you're then looking at reporting on that, that will support you with your commissioning outcomes. Right, so I've done a lot of talking. What I'm now going to do is I'm going to try and change the screen. Okay, so we've got 20 minutes. I'm going to change the screen and show you the live system. Gareth, do we have a drum roll? Oh, bear with. Ta-da! Am I in the right one? I am. Hey. Okay, so again, this will look very similar to what you're used to as a PRA customer. We have at the top our modules, and as you can see, they are all now live. So we have Alert, which is the free module for all local authorities and partner agencies. This includes 213B referrals and wider agency referrals to the local authority if someone is homeless or threatened with homelessness. But it also includes referrals to and from local authorities to and from local authorities, so your local connection referrals, for example, and notifications, which we're working on next. So do keep an eye on Alert, because we keep adding functionality to that for you. We've then got PRA, which some of you are already using, which is our homelessness module, so prevention, relief, accommodation, and homelessness. And what we're showing you now is the Register and Atlas. You've also got across here your reports and your users. So you remember I was talking about how you can set users up and give them separate individual permissions across the different modules. This will allow you to work efficiently with your registered providers and wider service owners to ensure that, to be honest, they can do as much of the work as you're comfortable them doing, and that sits within the service level agreements that you've got, and you're in a position to monitor that through the process. And the final one, and those of you that are our customers should have had a little present through the post from us this week. If you haven't and you are a customer, do let us know so we can make sure it hasn't gone astray. But I do know at least 30% of our customers, PRA customers, have received their little early season greetings, because they've started using the free version of Star that we've given to every customer of PRA for 3 months to enable you to really demonstrate the look and feel of how Star will allow you to take the feedback from your customers as part of your service development. If you want any more information on that, do give us a shout afterwards. But what we're looking at today is Register and Atlas. So it's a very, very similar looking dashboard. First and foremost, you've got your urgent actions. So you can see the things that you as an officer or manager, I'm signed in as a manager with cases. So I've got a little bit of both on here. So applications requiring verification. So what we've picked up here is some local authorities will allow an applicant to register for a service, and they will be automatically banded, pointed, and set to live. Some local authorities actually like their officers to verify certain information, especially around social housing, right at the beginning. So that could be identification, it could be eligibility, it could be reasonable preference, additional preference. So if you have a process internally, then we can make that work through EHR. If you decide actually this question means that dependent on the answer, this needs to be verified by one of my officers, then that will be part of your configuration, and it will show up for verification once an application is received where that question is answered as yes. If, as a direct result of that verification, some authorities say, actually, we go one step further than that. We like our officers to verify the application before we set it to live. But on certain elements, we also like a manager to validate that, so a manager to authorize that. So the officer confirms, yes, I've seen the identification, yes, I'm happy that that's a true likeness, and it confirms eligibility, and then the manager will authorize the officer's work. And again, this is entirely within your gift. So you decide on the verification and the authorization. We work with you around the questions and which questions trigger, whether that's an officer workflow or whether that's a manager workflow, and then it's automatically generated and sat within your dashboard. The reviews, so if a review is open to me, very similar to PRA here, you can see the process, where it's got to within the review process. Applications assigned to my organisation with open review, so I can see the overview of all reviews. And applications that have been unassigned. So this is where a new application's come in and it's not been assigned to one of your officers. Again, we recognise that local authorities work in one of two ways here. You will either have individual officers that work through your registrations and determine whether there's any verification, or you'll have teams that work through certain letters of the alphabet or certain applications. And again, through your configuration, we talk to you about how your service works and configure it according to what will work for you. But just looking at our widgets, we've got firstly our current applications. And what we have as our application, so you can see the overall. So at the moment, I'm on mine, aren't I? So you can see mine. If I click my team, you can see all of the registration applications within my team. And then if I click all, you can see all of the registration applications within my authority. And I think I'm in, which local authority do I work for?
Wolford.
Wolford. So I think it's something to do with Gareth and EastEnders going on here, but I work in Wolford. So you can see that we have 1,010 applications, and you can see that 398 of them are incomplete. And we've got small numbers here where they're pending management approval or pending assessment. So that's the officer function I was talking about. And then we have 603 that are set to live. So I can't stress enough how this is really within your gift as to how you work as individual local authorities. I was just checking I didn't have any questions there, because I don't think. Well, actually, we do have some questions, but I think Lindsay is sat with the sales team and she's actually answering questions as we go. So, but we do have a question from Sarah. We haven't got to Atlas, the demo yet, Sarah, but yes. So Sarah's asking, does Atlas keep historical adverts for re-advertising at a later date?
So yeah, Atlas integrates with the Housing Jigsaw accommodation database. So you can generate adverts from the same accommodation unit over time and view a history of tenancies across that accommodation. The question about local connection.
So Jason's asked, for some properties we have up to 8 tiers on the local connection cascade. Can Atlas manage this?
Yeah, so you've got the option of, if you've got quite wide areas, then you can have them as part of your standard application form so that everyone answers them. And then if you've got more granular local connection, then you can add those from a collection of those additional questions that Tracy went through at per advert. So if you know that an advert's in a particular area, you can choose from a collection of predefined questions that are relevant to that advert and give high priority to those that are in that area, and then lower priority to those that are outside that area.
So you can clearly say that they have to either meet this criteria, or those that meet the strongest connection criteria will be at the top of the list.
Yeah, so I mean, we've got high priority, low priority, and essential. So you could set a number. So if you said, do you have a local connection to the very small geography, you'd give high preference to that. And then you could have additional, as they cascade out, adding high priority for each of those in turn, which would mean that those at the very centre would match the most high priority labels. So in effect, yes, you can do exactly that.
Fabulous, thank you, Gareth. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to plug in my battery, because it appears that I'm running out of juice. I don't understand that, it's plugged in there. And what I'm going to do is show you, just going through the tabs, so just showing you the pending assessments. Let's see if we've got a pending assessment on here. So we have, so we've got 4 applications that are pending an assessment. So I'm going to go into Thomas Watkins and just have a look to see what the assessment is that's required on his case. So as you can see, at the moment, we've got the customer-facing questions. So these are the housing register questions that all of your customers would have completed, and for this application would have completed for social housing application. If it was a supported housing application or a supported accommodation question or a garage application, they would be separate. So at this, for Thomas, he's got a social housing and he's completed the customer facing questions. And I can look at these, and for this demo, we've only got minimal questions on here. But what we have done is just shown you, these are the questions that Thomas has completed as part of his application to join the housing register. What I will show you here is we also have some shared questions across the application. So if Thomas then went on to say, actually, I don't just want some social housing, I also want a garage, and I might need some floating support. If there's questions that you've determined as a local authority would be on more than one of your applications, one of your registrations, Thomas would only need to complete them once. And then when he opened up an application for garages, any questions that you've determined on garages, sorry, I clicked the wrong button there. Any question that you've determined on garages would already be answered when he went to complete that application. So he doesn't have to answer anything twice if you've determined that there are questions that run across multiple applications. So you could also use this as far as if you're looking to support an applicant or you complete the register questions for your local authorities. Because again, we've talking to lots of different authorities, we found that you do it in lots of different ways. But what I'm looking for on here is the officer workflow questions. So with Thomas, he's confirmed that he's the evidence that he needs to bring in and that he's completed it. And within this particular Walford authority, me as an officer, I need to confirm that I'm happy with the evidence, that yes, he's completed the question around has he got a medical condition, and I'm happy that we've now assessed the outcome of that medical, and that he's also said that he's homeless or threatened with homelessness, and I'm completing to confirm yes. We have a homelessness register application for him. So before his application can go live, I need to complete the verification element as an officer. And just to be really clear, this is in your gift. There doesn't have to be anything in here, or everything that you ask for your customers, your officers can verify. So it's entirely up to you. And in Walford, I need to manually band, where actually, as a local authority, you might decide, nope, we know how the banding system works. We might want to override somebody for something, but for general banding, as soon as the applicants completed the questions, that would generate the band that they need to be in and could just set them directly to live. So that really is within your gift to decide. I'm going to save that. Now, because we are quite a thorough local authority, because I've now determined that I'm comfortable with the information and I've processed those applications, my manager now needs to authorise the decisions that I've made. And my manager needs to confirm the banding. So as you can see, because as an officer, and just to be clear, I'm in here as a manager, so I've done the officer and management role. As an officer and manager, we've completed the back office registration, and Thomas's application is now set to live. You can also see here, this is very similar to prior, any notes, any meetings, any required documents, applications, anything that you need is also sat within the status for his application. But the one thing that I wanted to show you, it also shows you actually down here which policy the social housing policy is linked to within Walford Council. But back at the top, the other thing I wanted to show you that we're a little bit proud of is that we've added in the checklist here for the housing register. So if you decide as a local authority you want your officers to record information around when they've received evidence, you can do that within the different elements of the checklist. This one's a very simple one, but I'm completing this one because if I now go back in, we've got a yellow tick showing that actually green. I said yellow. We've got a green tick. So actually, if I'm now on leave for a week and somebody else comes in and Thomas phones up, immediately you can see that I've started to work my way through the checklist that you've deemed as a local authority you want to be completed when an application is registered. And it goes through all of the different elements that you may wish to determine. So your preference awarded, for example, if they don't set directly to live and they have to be verified by an officer, you've got the ability to look at your investigations and your reasonings on here. Just scrolling through so you can see all of the different questions that could be asked for an application. So if I said that reasonable preference has been awarded, again it's dynamic. I can now say, and this is directly from the legislation, the reasons for reasonable preference. So all of the legislative requirements are in here, plus if there's something else that you wanted to add, and that's the same with additional preference. So if I add additional preference, again, you can see the different preference criteria that you as a local authority are using as a direct result of the legislation. So it's just a way of really being clear around the reasoning and the investigations that are taking place against each application. This will also support you around things like eligibility and qualifying. So if somebody doesn't qualify, why they don't qualify, if you've reduced their priority, why you've reduced their priority. So if review is requested, your manager or your reviewing officer has all of the information in one place to be able to take that further. Shall I just look at Atlas? We're going to wander across to Atlas now. So again, it's a very, very similar process. You go straight to the top. Everything hangs off the customer. Atlas is how you now advertise any of your vacancies. So this could be through choice-based lettings, it could be a direct let, it could be a shortlist. And a direct let might be something like supported accommodation. A shortlist could be you run a shortlist for a garage or an allotment because you think actually you're not going to get very many people and you want to run a very long shortlist. And choice-based lettings will be for those services that you allow your customers to place an open and transparent bid on. So the dashboard is very, very similar. What it also shows you is it shows you the last case that you had open at any given time. So if I am looking at a shortlist and then I want to go back to his application, I can very quickly do that. So if I'm on the phone to somebody, just as a reminder, this element of the screen is the same as prior. So if I wanted to add any information, if I was in the customer and I wanted to add a note or an action for myself, it wouldn't take me away from the left-hand side of the screen. This would still appear. So I can see all of my adverts on here. I can see the advertised vacancies and whether they're mine or whether they're a social housing registered provider, and then any other types that I add on here. I can see my shortlist, so whether I've got a matched properties and whether I've then gone on to offer one of those properties and they've been accepted. The customers, we've still got some additional columns to add to this one, some additional labels to add to this widget. And this one shows you whether the first successful letting. So sometimes it's quite interesting as a local authority to see, actually, I've advertised 4 properties and of those only one of them was successfully let to the first household member. So just to get a feel for how many refusals you're getting, whether that's from the customer or whether that's from the provider. But again, it's just a very quick sort of visual view of, okay, you know, do we need to think about the way we're advertising? Do we need to think about how many properties people can bid for, what the how many properties they're able to refuse, what the bypass reasons are for our partner agencies. So just so you can sort of make best use of your stock, really, and best use of the administration. So I'm just going to go, so shall I go into a shortlist? Should we go into a shortlist? So I'm going to look at the properties that I've already run a shortlist for. And I can see all of these properties. So these are properties where they've been advertised. Now these are shortlisted, as in not, are these choice-based lettings or just shortlisted properties?
There'll be both your direct lets and your CBLs that have shortlisted.
Fabulous. So once you advertise a property, if you put it onto choice-based lettings, and then once the cycle has ended, they will show here as shortlisted, so anybody that's bid against them. If you do a direct shortlist for a property, they will also show on here. So shall I look for... Let's just give one a go, shall we? So we'll just pop into this one. So again, you can either look at the advert or you can view the shortlist. Because if you're going to work on the shortlist, obviously you need to view it. And again, this is within your gift to determine whether you do this or whether you're the provider of the accommodation or support runs the shortlist. So these ones have been bypassed. So we've already started working on this one. The first 3 have been bypassed, so allocated elsewhere. So all 3 of them have obviously come up to the top of the list on a few of the properties, because as you could see, we had about 80 properties on our shortlist, which, as local authorities know, generally mean you've got the same people on the top of all of them. So we're now on applicant 4, and it's Louise Phillips. She's in band 6. So we've got labels against these properties, and I haven't shown that yet, and I'm probably not going to get time to. So when you place an advert, you can put labels on to show that as Gareth was explaining earlier, either there's an essential criteria, or there's a high priority or a low priority for property. So there's no essential criteria on this particular property, but there is a high priority and a low. So all of the high priority cases are showing first. So at this stage, I can make an offer to my customer, or as a provider, And again, these are configurable. I can determine that actually it's not suitable and I'm going to be bypassing this customer. So unfortunately, just going to pick that one and click bypass. So she's been bypassed, it's clear she's been bypassed, and that then allows me to go on to the next customer. So Helen allocates. So if I make an offer to Helen Francis, I can say that she's accepted the offer. I mean, obviously this is going to happen over a period of time. It's not all going to happen today, but you know, we are the local authority that is updated on the day, and I'm going to confirm the date. So that property has now been allocated to Helen Francis. I could go in and look at Helen's application form from here. I can see the details around her application. Again, depending on whether you do this or whether you decide that your RP or provider is able to do this, I can look at the last viewed shortlist from here. So for all that, I'm in Helen's application, and as you can see, we've just got an F, so this is just a female within one application. If I wanted to, I could go back to the last shortlist that I viewed. So if you're going through, looking at further details, whether there's any notes or information against an application, you don't have to then try and go back to your shortlist. You can literally just go to the shortlist that you're working on and processing that individual application. I'm going to go back to the dashboard, and on my dashboard we can see that our shortlist has reduced as a direct result that we've now actually allocated that property.
And one more click for the allocation. You just click on view the shortlist. And then there's the allocator button there.
There we go. I go back. Fabulous. Okay, I'm conscious it's past. I'm just going to have a quick look and see if we've got any other questions. So Jason said that we're not a stock holding authority. What are the options for sending the shortlist to the housing provider if they don't have access to the system? So Jason, the way that the system works is you're able to provide very limited access to your partner agencies so that they're able to only see the information that you want them to. So if you only want them to see the top application, or you want to cut and paste the details out into an email, you're able to do that. So the idea is that they literally see the information that you decide is relevant for your partner agencies to view. They don't have to have full access. Actually, if I show you the users, close that a minute. So what we have here is the Walford Council is where I work. And I can edit the permissions, and this is where you can see all of the permissions within the system that I have as a Walford Council employee. If I go back Walford Housing Association, you can see that they have all of the permissions for Atlas on here. If I now show you Queen Vic, because we're not as confident about the processes within Queen Vic, so we haven't given as many permissions. So they can add an advert, they can allocate a shortlist, they can process a shortlist, view a shortlist, view a dashboard, and view management dashboard, but they can't edit or delete or do any of the reporting functionality. So again, this is within your gift as a local authority to decide how you set this up for your authority and then any other partner agencies that you add onto the system. So it only leaves me really to say thank you for joining us this afternoon. We've got 2 more webinars booked in, one around Tara later this year, and then early in the new year, Alert, to show you the newest functionality on Alert. What we will do, just as a reminder, is we will cut and paste this webinar and we'll add it onto the usual place, sending you a link so that you're able to view it at your leisure. Any questions that have been asked, we will collate and add a response and send that across to all of you. That just leaves me to say thank you for joining us this afternoon, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Say bye, Gareth.
Thank you. Goodbye.